Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the launch of the Journal of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, or 2021 version. We have an exciting journal to be launched this year for you. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of that, I'm going to just let the director of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society just make some brief welcoming remarks. Over to you, Alessandra.
Thank you very much, Kay, and thank you all for being with us this morning. We are really very pleased to have you with us. I'm Alessandra Cummins, Director of the Museum, and really it's one of my greatest pleasures each year to welcome the launch of the museum's journal. We have to say we are a bit late, but it was well worth it. It's a bumper edition, and we can't thank our authors enough for their contributions to developing new knowledge in Barbados over a series of topics, which are going to be explained to you in greater depth by the editor of the journal. But I look forward very much to the dissemination of the journal, not just to members, but to each of the organizations who are currently stakeholders in the journal, and most particularly our greatest partner in this project is the University of the West Indies. And I'm looking forward to hearing from our partners on the achievement of this progress. Thank you very much, and looking forward to hearing from the rest of you this morning.
We now invite Dr. Henderson Carter, the chair of our Publications and Public Programming Committee, to make some brief remarks.
Morning, everyone. It's Trevor Carmichael, President of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society. Ms. Alessandra Cummins, Director of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, Professor Emeritus Pedro Welch, Editor of the Journal of Barbados Museum and Historical Society, Dr. Scott M. Fitzpatrick, archaeologist and esteemed author and contributor, Dr. Alison Ramsey, lecturer at the UWI St. Augustine campus and esteemed contributor, staff at the museum, other contributors, Ms. Sally Miller of Miller Publishing, members of the media, members of the Publications and Programming Committee, a pleasant good morning. It gives me great pleasure this morning as the chair of the BMHS Publications and Programming Committee to render brief remarks on the launch of our most important publication, the enduring Journal of Barbados Museum and Historical Society 2021. This 2021 journal, as usual, has something for everybody. For teachers and students at the secondary and tertiary level, there's something to look forward to. For example, we have Marcia Nurse's article on the 1816 War and Simmons Plantation. And this is very important for the CSEC and CAPE students. We also have Kathleen Monteith's piece on coffee cultivation in Jamaica, another useful piece at all levels. The article on Blackman Slave Hospital will be of great utility for students of West Indian history. And this has been well produced by Mr. Miguel Pina and Sir Henry Fraser. For our archaeology students, we have the article on Walker's Reserve by Scott Fitzpatrick et al. Of similar vintage is the piece on the synagogue site by Professor Michael DeWall. And for the general public, And also for educators, we have several very good articles. There's Ian Dowding's article on golf in Barbados, and I'm really looking forward to reading that. Valerie Clark's piece on Orgalope seal. There's Family Formation in St. Peter by Martin Cox. Heritage Through Stamp Issues by Harold Codrington. And an update on the Dictionary of Barbadian Biography project by Professor Sir Wilville Marshall. And that project will soon come to fruition. I wish to thank our dedicated editor, Professor Welch, for this very outstanding journal, something that people always look forward to. Indeed, as I was in the supermarket a few days ago, one of our readers, dedicated readers, asked me for the journal. Where is the journal? I am pleased to say it is here and it is being launched at this moment. Thanks also to our esteemed contributors for the varied topics and for making this journal a journal for everybody, a journal that appeals to the broad cross-section of Barbadian society. Thanks to Kay Hall, who has worked, I know, very hard, and her team at the museum to get this journal ready. Thanks also to our director, Ms. Cummins, and once again to Miller Publishing for doing an excellent job. Let us all spread the news that our journal is here. God bless you all. Thank you. Over to you, Kay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carter. At this point in time, we're going to invite one of our authors just to share a few words on his piece, Dr. Scott Fitzpatrick, who has given us an article on Walker's Reserve, which I'm sure we're all looking forward to really, really indulging when we get a chance to read it.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's nice to see some familiar faces. Excuse me if I'm coughing a little bit. I in fact came down with COVID a few days ago, and am just kind of getting over it a little bit, even after being vaccinated and boosted. So I'm thankful I had that at least. I'll just like to say a few short words about my experience working with the museum in this regard, and then also the project itself and how a lot of this research came to be. I actually first started working in Barbados, and as I say this out loud, it seems kind of incredible, but 29 years ago with Peter Druitt, which was really my first major archaeological experience in 1993. And that was a real pivotal turning point for me as a student, coming to really what was my first international destination. I'd never been overseas before. I had never really participated in an archaeological dig. And this was me as a younger version trying to explore and figure out what I wanted to do. And I remember during the course of that project, reading up on a lot of Peter's previous publications, and those included ones that he had published with the journal at the museum. And so I immediately became familiar with the journal itself, got to visit the museum a number of different times. And ultimately, that was the precursor to me coming back and doing my graduate research in Barbados as a master's student later on, again with Peter, for a much longer period of time. While I've come back to Barbados on many different occasions over the years, I've been mostly doing collections-based research with the assistance of Alessandra and Miguel and others. And Kevin Farmer, who was actually on one of those earlier digs with me, and really this research article that we've published here now is the first part of what we hope is a series of papers that will come out as part of a project that was initiated really by the Walkers Reserve and Sancor, and essentially their nonprofit organization that they've developed as a result of that. So this was really a private company reaching out to scholars and saying, we would like to do this kind of work, and inviting us in. And that's a really rare thing to have happen in archaeology. And so we were really, really pleased that, that this kind of project came to fruition. I think that in the age of publication today, where academics such as myself are pressured by our universities and our departments to put articles in certain places, but that don't really reach the audience that we want them to reach all the time either. And so I am really pleased as well that the journal has persisted over all of these decades, that it's publishing research by local scholars or people doing research in Barbados, and it's for the local community. And that's really, I think, one of the gems of the Caribbean in terms of publishing scholarly research is this journal by the museum, which is a rarity in itself anymore. And I hope it continues on. I really, I think in terms of this research, which is again a coordinated effort between a number of different local stakeholders and academic scholars outside of Barbados, really is a turning point of sorts in bringing together a large group of people toward a common goal of trying to conserve and preserve the island's cultural heritage and associated facets. This has been a really rewarding experience, and overall we're really happy that the museum has given us this venue to publish this work. And again, we continue to find ways to conduct our research, and we hope that we have a continuing relationship with you as time goes on. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Scott. At this time, we're going to invite just one more of our authors to say a few words. We thought it would be a good idea this year to just have a little sampling so people can share a little bit about the experience of working on the journal as well as their research. So our second author who's going to speak this morning is Dr. Alison Ramsey.
Thank you very much, Kay. Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to speak to you today. My experience working with the journal has been a positive one. And upon reflection, I realized that it was 10 years ago that I actually submitted my first article to the journal. I would encourage researchers, especially young researchers, those who have just finished their doctoral studies, to consider the journal as a worthy one to publish in. I would say the process is quite good as your article is reviewed and you are going to get feedback on how to improve. I would encourage anyone who's interested in researching and publishing on Barbados' history, culture, heritage, and that of the wider Caribbean in general, to think of the journal as a place to put your work. And of course, it is going to be among those with worthy reputation as well. My article for this time is going to be on cropover. And of course, as you know, cropover is very integral to our identity and culture. And in the case of Barbados, when you research cropover, you will learn that end of crop celebrations took place across different islands in the region, in St. Vincent, in Trinidad, and so forth. But Barbados seems to continue to hold on to this particular aspect of festivals and celebration and end of crop celebrations. So typically we learn about cropover in the period of African enslavement and so forth. However, I decided that I wanted to take the discussion into the post-independence period and discuss the first decade of its implementation as a reinvented tradition. So the discussion goes into aspects of identity politics, aspects of whose culture and so forth with the Crop Over Festival in that era. It also examines African cultural tensions, the importance of masquerade, the development of calypso and calypso tents, and so forth. So I do hope that you enjoy reading the article and other articles that are quite interesting in this year's journal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison. This is not really a planned part of the program, but since Professor Woodville Marshall is in attendance, and I know lots of people are anxiously awaiting the publication of the Dictionary of Barbadian Biography, we are wondering, Professor Marshall, if you would be so kind as to grace us with a few words about the DBB and your article in this year's journal.
Thank you very much. You took me a little bit by surprise there, but yes, I would just like to say a few words, and these are the words. First of all, this project could be seen to some extent as a companion project to that project, which was more or less sponsored by the Department of History at the university and by the Museum and Historical Society. And the other project that I'm referring to, of course, is the project which produced the Place Names book. So in a sense, you can see a project which features people as a companion piece to that project which featured places. In fact, that was the point made by the late Edward Braffett, just before he died, that we are moving in a good direction, places and then people. So quickly, what this project involves, as the name says, is this, that what we are attempting to do is to produce short biographies of those individuals who we can identify as having made some impact beyond the immediate circles in the Barbadian context, or because they were Barbadians wherever they were. So notice how I put it, because we are not just talking about Barbadians active in Barbados, we are also talking about Barbadians who might be active elsewhere. So we'll be identifying these Barbadians who made an impact. As it turns out, as you would expect, most of them did the activity inside of Barbados. But of course, I would think about a quarter of them were active outside of Barbados in what you might regard as the Barbadian diaspora. So that therefore, these 650 names, or these 650 persons that we have managed to identify, will tell us a lot, therefore, about Barbadian history, but particularly about Barbadian achievement from the time the island was colonized by Englishmen in the 17th century up until roughly the early 20th century. Because this is a project, we have identified people who have been dead for at least 10 years before we started the project, which was in 1916. And the intention, of course, is that through the Department of History and the museum, that this project will be ongoing, that every 10 years, we will in fact be producing and updating of the dictionary. So hopefully this first edition will arrive later this year. And of course, I leave it therefore to the sponsoring agencies to ensure that in 10 years' time, we will in fact have the second edition and so on. Thank you.
Good morning. At this point in time now, I'd like to introduce the editor of the journal, Professor Pedro Welch, to tell us about the experience of curating this year's journal.
Thank you very much. Let me say good morning to all those who are present online, and certainly those who I can see and those who I can't see online. It is a very, very signal moment for me and for the museum and its director and the other members of staff, as well as those who are members of council. A very signal moment. We have come through a torrid COVID time and having escaped COVID and most of his relatives, we appear to be on the verge of meeting some more of them. I don't wish to meet any of them at any time soon, but nevertheless, it is for me, as I said, a very signal moment that we can get to this point where we are producing yet another journal. This journal published this year continues in the tradition of the previous journals. And let me pause for a moment to thank those previous editors who have done much to keep the flagship flying and to keep the flag flying. And let me acknowledge also the very important work of those who pioneered the Barbados Museum and its various publications. This year, we are at a crossroads, so to speak, in the sense that this year, well, no, I'm running into trouble now because the year has finished, last year has finished so quickly, and we're into 2022 now. Last year, as we move towards the end of last year, we were at a position where we were making some momentous changes to our political setup. We were moving towards a Republican status. In that same year, we also had the removal of the statue of Lord Nelson, one of the icons of the English presence within the New World and certainly in Barbados. And it is in that context, therefore, that the Museum Journal seeks to capture these very important moments in our development, our social and political development. I don't know if you probably can't see, but here I have a copy of the Museum Journal, and on that Museum Journal, and you'll see when you get hold of it, that there is a picture of the installation of our new president. But in the far right corner of this back, you find a picture of the removal of the statue of Lord Nelson. We thought it would be evocative for this moment to have that on the book, on the cover of the current journal. After that, after having made that point, I wish to then move very quickly to what we're doing in the editorial. In the editorial, we thought that we would capture this political moment. And therefore, in the editorial, which I entitled From the Oistins Charter, 1652 to Independence, 1966 to Republic, 2021. And then there is and then my first subheading is Antecedents of Republicanism in the Barbados Charter of 1652. What in fact we were attempting to do in the editorial is to capture the evolution of politics in Barbados, the evolution of a parliamentary tradition. And in capturing that evolution of parliamentary tradition, we pointed out that those who settled in Barbados and signed what is then called the Oistins Charter were in fact expressing and espousing what we call elements of a democracy that they did not believe in. By that I mean that those who began the Oistins Charter proclaiming that they had rights as Englishmen were at the same time enslavers who did not foresee at any time in the near future or the far future that the enslaved people would ever have any rights. In last year's journal, I had in fact done a transcript of the 1661 slave law. And they were fully aware by the time we get just around this time that there were laws that govern the enslaved, but the laws said very specifically that the enslaved were not entitled to be governed by British law. If you read the 1661 slave law, excuse me, it says that the enslaved people were not entitled to be governed by British law. More than that, the 1661 slave law also makes it clear that the enslaved were of another kind. And by another kind, I said last year, what that really meant was that they were human beings, but not quite. So there's something which debarred them from polite company. So in this year's editorial, I'm really tracing what happens as Englishmen sought to introduce what we later come to call the old representative system. That's really what they're trying to put in place. But the point is very clear that that old representative system did not, in fact, include the enslaved. And later, it hardly even included those who were emancipated. So once we had gone through that, then they begin to trace after what we call the riots, some people call it the riots, some people call it disturbances, the events of the 1930s, when for the very first time after, Black African people in Barbados got the right to vote. When I traced that point, and what happened in that context was that that once they got the right to vote, a semblance of democracy began to fill our political landscape. And since that time, as we move towards independence, as the editorial points out, there were a lot of discussions which had to do with what shape was our political system going to have as we went into the future. Ultimately, we ended that debate, I said first with independence, which kept the British monarchy in place, and now we have gone the next step, and we have said goodbye to the English monarchy in our political system. You know, it's very interesting. I attended the ceremony, and Prince Charles was there, and it was particularly evocative again when the police band played Old Lang Syne as we came to the end of the installation. It really was a poignant moment, and the editorial seeks to capture this change. But having given the editorial, then we continue in our journal to have a number of contributions. And I wish to point out that all of the contributors have done an excellent job of showing to us some aspects of Barbadian and Caribbean history, because we must remember that the journal, while it is the journal of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, the journal is also a volume, a book that seeks to capture elements of Caribbean history, wider Caribbean history. So that is where we are. So the first article we had was one which looks at the Crop Over Festival, and that was presented by Addison Ramsey. And incidentally, I feel a particular personal pride that Addison is sharing this with us, because when I was at the University of West Indies, I supervised a PhD thesis by Addison, for which she got high commendation. So I feel like a daddy, if you want to call me that. That's quite all right. That's not a problem. I feel like a daddy, just in the same way that Professor Sir William Marshall once referred to me as his son. One day when he was introducing me, because clearly he was my mentor at the campus, and much of what I achieved was largely due to his encouragement. So I am very happy for Addison's work. There's a very fascinating look at crop over, the historical antecedents of crop over, and then some of the elements of crop over leading to our time. Immediately following that, the next article is one which is a gem. Over the years, we've had a lot of very good archaeological presentations in the journal. Went back several years, almost from the very beginning of the journal. This year is no exception. We have a very important article by Mike Duval, who worked with us at the University of West Indies at one time, but has now moved on elsewhere in this global world. And what she's done is given us an article entitled Pre-Colonial Special Activity, Use of the Synagogue Site. And she's looking at the site around the Bridgetown Synagogue. Incidentally, that synagogue is considered to be one, if not the second oldest, if not the first oldest, the oldest, it is considered at least the second oldest synagogue in this Western Hemisphere. The persons who, in fact, started the New York synagogue were persons who had originally been in Barbados. And that is one of the things that many of our readers and listeners probably don't know about the history of Jewry, of the Hebrew nation in Barbados, and what happens. They also went elsewhere within the Caribbean, and even to England. If you go into the English synagogue in London, we're going to find that there are some connections with the Barbados experience. So this particular article by Duval really explores what we call the archaeology of the site, and takes us back into what we call pre-colonial elements of that site. Because wherever we go in Barbados, there has been an imposition on the landscape, on the physical landscape, and that has been captured. Then there's one that I considered a particular gem as well, and that is the one by Ian Dowding on golfing. Incidentally, if Ian is listening with us, certainly my mother went to do some golfing. She's not 94 years old, but she has enjoyed her peace on the golfing range. I don't know much about it except seeing and watching some games occasionally, but this one goes beyond the game itself and offers us insights into the administration of the game in Barbados, into its historical development. And I think it's one of the most important presentations on golfing in this part of the hemisphere that you'll find anywhere. I wish to congratulate him, Ian, for entrusting this presentation to the journal. Martin Cox is the next contributor who introduces us to his family. It's particularly important. We've had some other genealogical pieces in the journal over the years, but there was something particularly important about this introduction. That is, when we look back in the past, the journal began at a time when most of the genealogical presentations were the genealogies, rather, of the Caucasian, the Euro-Barbadian population, and not the Afro-Barbadian population. Within the last few years, things have changed. And now we have people making full use of the archival resources that we have available to us. And this is one of the presentations which helps us to chart what I call a coming of age of the journal. We're already there, but I mean, this is a further coming of age. I am very happy for this article. Incidentally, I see that Marcia Nurse is with us, and I must point out that in the past, she also published with us a special piece on her ancestry, and that is also something we may wish to note as we look at the journal over time. I see here present with us a friend, Professor Kathleen A. Monteith. I am very privileged and blessed to have her present. Without any hesitation whatsoever, she responded to my request to make a contribution to this journal. I knew that she was an expert on the history of coffee cultivation in Jamaica and elsewhere in the Caribbean. I know that many of us would not be aware of that particular contribution, and I thought it'd be useful for us to have a look at something other than sugarcane, although you can't escape sugarcane in Barbados. This article by Kathleen shares a lot of insights for us into how coffee becomes a central crop in Jamaica. Incidentally, I don't know how many of us knew that Barbados used to grow a little coffee at one time. As a youngster, when I grew up in Barbados, in places like a village called Clifton Hill, which is not far from Mount Wilson Plantation, in the rural areas of Barbados, many of the peasant farmers used to grow coffee. And if you go to Wexford Hall in Barbados, you'll still find coffee there. But that disappeared in Barbados very quickly. So there's been no official cultivation of coffee, but people still find wild coffee around. But this is not wild coffee we're talking about. We're talking about the source of the famous Jamaica Blue Mountain coffee and all the other things that we associate with Jamaica. Incidentally, whenever I myself stay away from the caffeine. I'm sorry, Kathleen, that I stay away from the caffeine, but when I go to Jamaica, I might take the decaffeinated variety. So I'm sorry that I don't take the pure variety, but this is an article that, like the others, is a must read. It will offer a lot of insights into another aspect of Caribbean life. Then following Kathleen's contribution, we have another important contribution by Professor Sir Henry Fraser and by Miguel Pena. The two of them have collaborated in an article on the Black Man's Slave Hospital. And Black Man's there, I said Black Man's, but it's really Black Man's, because in the Barbadian context, when we say Black Man, we're talking about a surname. And the area is called Black Man's. But very, very curiously again, is also the story of a Black man's or an African, a slave hospital. There are not too many examples of slave hospitals throughout this hemisphere, but there's one that is in Barbados, which deserves, in fact, official attention. It deserves some memorial, some restoration. When I think of that restoration, I am thinking of Sir Lennox, Dr. Lennox, Professor Lennox, I'm trying to remember his surname now, but you know what I mean when I say Professor Honeychurch. And he has done a tremendous work elsewhere in the Caribbean. And I can foresee something happening with this Black man's slave hospital. I really want to encourage that. Now, in our journal this year, also, there is a piece done, a presentation done by Valerie Clark, who was a librarian of the University of the West Indies. I know I've known for many years. In fact, I think I was, in fact, her lecturer at one time at the university. But she has done a piece here on Dame Olga Christine Loke-Seal, who was a philanthropist, a very important contributor to Barbados' social life. And this article is done with all the skill of the librarian, all the skill of a documentalist, all of the skill of a person who is very familiar with the necessary literary contribution that must be researched and looked at. I am very happy with this piece. She approached us very early on to ask if we'd be willing to publish. And once we had read and looked at her work, we said a resounding yes, that this had to be also included in the journal. We're coming soon to the last lap, but let me go on to the next contributor, Harold Covington, who has also honored our journal this year by just delivering a presentation called Celebrating the Built Heritage of Barbados Through Stamp Issues. And this will be of more than passing interest, even to those of us who may not be involved in stamp collecting. It really explores the visual imagery, and I'm sorry we didn't have any visual images to give you, but it explores the visual imagery that is present in the various stamp collections of Barbados, the various stamp issues of Barbados. And I would suggest too that this particular article will attract your attention. Harold goes through a number of the various issues of stamps, exploring how they represent various important aspects of Barbados's historical tradition in the built heritage. And then we come to a piece that is bound to titillate the imagination of the historians and the genealogists and those who are interested in Caribbean historiography. And I'm dealing here with the work by the presentation by Marcia Nurse, links between the 1816 war and Simmons's plantation on St. Philip. Several months ago, when Marcia first sent me an initial piece, I immediately recognized that this piece, that this would have historic significance. And the issue that she's dealing with in this particular article has to do with the fates of some of those who were enslaved and mentioned in the reports of the 1816 war, sometimes known to some Barbadians familiarly as Buster's Rebellion. She's taken the time to explore the fate of a woman called Nanny Grigg. Now, one of the important things of this particular piece is this, that there's some of our activists, and I'm using that word activists very carefully here, but some of our activists have been insisting that Nanny Grigg should be a national heroine of Barbados. Well, given recent announcement of another national heroine in Barbados, she might well be entitled to be so honored. But there's one little caveat that we might wish to take note of. The prevailing information that our historians have had on Nanny Grigg is that Nanny Grigg died, she was probably executed as a result of the 1816 rebellion. since she was one who was identified as one who had given to her, the fellow enslaved workers, news about abolition and news that it was being withheld from them, that she read it, she's supposed to read it in the newspapers. Well, Marcia Nurse has done what many of us have not done. And what she's done is she's gone into the very belly of the archives, looked at every possible documented source that you could find. And she has identified that there are at least a couple of Nanny Griggs. But certainly, if what she's saying is correct, the Nanny Griggs that she has identified, and certainly, if not all of them, at least one of those Nanny Griggs is almost certainly the Nanny Grigg who was on the Simmons plantation, the Nanny Grigg who is supposed to have died as a result of the 1860 rebellion. And if that is true, and I believe it is, that's one of the reasons why we publish it in this journal. If what she's saying is correct, it means that we are being premature in trying to attribute to Nanny Grigg some heroic status. She's questioned, in fact, some of the rationale for placing Nanny Grigg in a position of prominence when it comes to arguing about the cause of the 1860 rebellion. We want to congratulate Marcia again on another excellent piece. She has begun again with a piece before on her family tree, now on her family heritage, and now she's gone into one where the angels fear to tread. But I'm trusting that what will happen as a result of this will force many people to look again. Still coming to the last lap, we have the results of another archaeological piece done by Scott Fitzpatrick, Matthew Napolitano, I have to be careful about pronunciation, and Philip Jorison. And this is a archaeological investigation of what is called Walker's Reserve in St. Andrew, Barbados. And this is, again, a very important archaeological piece, which is looking very closely at what happened over time. Much of our historic landscape has been marred by interference. And by that, I mean, you have situations where you have building. And since Barbados is only 106,000 acres or about, much of the land in Barbados has already been appropriated, or in some cases, misappropriated. And in that context, what has happened to us is that that a lot of the landscape where one would be looking for archaeological remnants, archaeological evidence, some of that has been destroyed, some of it has been hurt. And this particular piece that we have here gives us some preliminary results. I'm expecting that in the future, as Scott and his team continue to investigate what is happening in Barbados, that they will give us some more. So I'm really saying to them, right now, I'm saying for this vantage point, this can't be the last. If you send us something called preliminary archaeological investigation, then I must expect, in short order, the post-preliminary archaeological investigation. I expect the results of that. So this is something I want to share with you. And now, you already heard from Professor Sir Wilton Marshall on the projected dictionary of Caribbean biography. I must confess, and I use the word confess there very advisedly, that I have done a couple of pieces for him. He and I have had many, many discussions, and not vigorous arguments, because one doesn't argue with a mentor, one discusses with a mentor. There's a big, big difference. And I have discussed with him several issues as I wrote some of these pieces. But I'm looking forward to this presentation as well. I know a lot of work has gone into it. I've done a couple of pieces for other biographies overseas. And I know that it's by no means a huge feat. So I really am encouraging Professor Marshall in this venture. I'm looking that later this year, 2022, we will have that dictionary, that projected dictionary of national biography. I close now by saying to us again, let me wish you all the best for 2022. Again, I urge you to keep far from COVID and its relatives. I know I see that some relatives are called Omicron and Delta, and I don't know if you have Epsilon. I heard something coming from some other part of the world, and I can't even get pronounced it, but I don't know if it's IIU or some strange name, some strange relative has come on the scene. I don't want us to come here, not at all. At least if you come, let them come after the next independence comes, or somewhere down the future, but not now. We have elections coming up, and I would hate to think that one of these versions, these relatives comes here and visits during this independence period, the next couple of days or so. So let me thank you again. I see Sir Trevor Carmichael with us. Happy to see him as well. Happy to see all of you. I see Harold Compton with us, Martin Cox, Kay Hall, who is always there. And let me permit me. I know I've been going on for some time, but that is the privilege of the editor. So blame the people who are presenting this program for letting the editor speak on like this. But that's how it goes. We have had tremendous help from Sally Miller of Miller Publishing. I mean, I am absolutely, they have done yeoman service for us. And I would say long may it continue, but I know it is at a cost. And I wish to thank them very much for what they have given to, and I don't use the word given to us. I want to thank Alessandra Cummins. I don't know if you know, but she has the eyes of a hawk. There are things that I've gone through and read umpteen times, and she will look back through it again and she will find something that needs to be adjusted. I spoke to her recently and said we have to employ a copy editor or somebody else to have a look. But I mean, her work is tremendous. And this journal, the fact that it's coming now, with anything that you find in it that may be untoward, let me say to you, I accept full responsibility as editor. So don't blame anybody else. But I'm saying, without her contribution, we wouldn't have got where we got now. So I want to thank her very much for that excellent work. And now, and Kay Hall, Lord have mercy. I mean, I'm gonna stop talking because I've got too many other people. I can miss somebody. But I see Kay look at me right now on the screen, so I can bring her here. I just want to thank all of you. Have a good day, everybody. I stop here and let the rest of the program roll on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pedro, for that wonderful overview of this year's journal. I am sure everyone is looking forward to delving into these exciting articles and looking forward, of course, to seeing what's going to happen, not just this year, but next year. For those of you who might be interested in contributing to the journal, you can write us at editor@barbnews.org.bb or educate@barbnews.org.bb, and we can provide you with a couple of our journal guidelines to make it easier to make your contributions to the journal. The next part of our program will be the official declaration of the journal as launched, as it were, by our president, Sir Trevor Carmichael.
Thank you, Kay. And I don't get an opportunity to speak virtually. Most of my virtual appearances are board meetings where you just, agree or disagree or do something fairly minuscule. And I almost say and temporary. Here, I've been asked to give the closing remarks. And quite frankly, in these circumstances, one feels that it is necessary to say something of value, even though it may be of very limited and small value, because for many reasons, but some of which are obvious to all of you. The first is, after having listened to the journal editor and understanding and learning what is in store for us again, one recognizes that this is no trifling matter. This is a piece of outstanding scholarship, which, is here not only to be read in a serious fashion, but just to be enjoyed. And I have a little script here, but I've moved away from it because I was literally so overwhelmed by the remarks of Professor Pedro Welch, someone whom I continually admire, respect, and just enjoy listening to and enjoy communing with. And I'm sure that I speak for all of you when I say that. But Madam Director, and again, Journal Editor, distinguished excellencies who are here, and also distinguished authors and the museum staff, Ms. Kay Hall and her team, Mrs. Sally Miller of Miller Publishing, and members of the press. Let me say I'm delighted to make these closing remarks on the launch of the 2021 journal. It would be inappropriate and indeed out of place for me on this occasion and in this forum, this virtual forum, to launch into any detailed and serious commentary on the content of this most learned literary product. As a matter of fact, that has been so well done that anything I tried in that direction would be arrogance and obviously surplus usage. I do, however, feel comfortable in taking the liberty and license in my capacity as president of the society to commend to the reading public this excellent work under the editorship and excellence, as I said earlier, of the erudite Professor Emeritus Pedro Welch. Professor Welch has again given us some grist to our reading sensibilities with his own article, his own editorial, if you will, when he looks at the Oyston's 1652 Barbados chapter, capturing really the evolution of it, having last year given us the Barbados Slave Code. I was delighted that he was able to come back this year and give us that link of continuity. Thank you again, Professor. I can thank you. I can't thank you more. In addition, he has been able, in his brilliantly incisive editorial style, to synthesize and contextualize this year's varied yet relevant contributions. Some time ago, I shared some thoughts on the journal as a holistic literary product. And as we have left the year 2021 with a global sense of shared loss, and as we enter 2021 with promise and expectation, we read a journal which will help and will help us greatly in that mental enterprise and that mental exercise. This journal, ladies and gentlemen, I almost said the listening public, is the oldest continuously published journal in the English-speaking Caribbean, and I will never tire in saying that. Starting publication in 1933, its aim, which naturally has been changed and nuanced since its inception, is, quote, to publish matter relating to the history and antiquities of Barbados. And that scope has been liberally interpreted, as you would have heard. In line with this aim, the journal has published a wide variety of materials, including original research articles, edited translations, extracts of 18th and 19th century newspapers, early vestry minutes, manuscripts, letters, diaries, journals, miscellaneous manuscript accounts held in private and public collections, and genealogical studies and family histories, including also more recently, well, not so more recently, but including architectural studies and archaeological studies. In general, the journal contains information and materials which are of considerable value, not only for the study of Barbadian history, but also for Caribbean history and also colonial history, American colonial history, and post-colonial history as a whole. I have said in the past about the problems of the journal in terms of the early journal, I should say, of the absence of an effective index. And that was remedied in the late 1960s. And again, I will not tire in repeating it because that was important. The production of an index in the 1960s by Mr. Michael Chandler, and that was a subject index to volumes 1 to 31. And that 19-page mimeograph index, originally based on typescript and manuscript indices, compiled by the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, was later revised and expanded by Mr. Chandler himself. And in his words was, quote, largely an index to titles and articles and does not claim to be a comprehensive index of subjects dealt with in the pages of the journal. Now, today, the journal, under the stewardship of Professor Welch, appears as a popular product which does not lose its scholarly and intellectual rigor. It is popular because it invites the public to submit manuscripts, as you heard a short while ago, and it maintains an intellectual rigor with its very meticulously established publications guidelines, both as to substance and also as to form. Professor Welch, as editor, is sensitive yet rigorous, a combination which is not achieved by mere chance. Now, he has very eloquently and succinctly given us a taste of what is on offer as the various pieces of excellent research, and he's done it by very detailed. I had planned today to do something else, but I'm not going to do it, which was to compare it, not in terms of, comparisons are odious, someone said, so it wasn't, not in that sense, but to reflect back on our commemorative journal, which had only 5 articles at the time, but which spanned an interesting scope. And I won't go into them, or even I'll just name the authors and leave you, especially those of us who are over 50, leave you to think what the articles might have been, or to get the journal and read it. But P.F. Campbell himself, E.G.B. Goodin, Jerome Handler, celebrated Ronnie Hughes, whom we recognized at university, and John Wickham. So those were the authors in that, as they called it, a commemorative issue. And let me say that when I heard the authors this morning and when I got the sneak preview, I felt that this was as commemorative an issue as any issue could be. So I say that. I was also delighted that our former first vice president and museum stalwart, Professor Sir Woodville Marshall, has shared today work on that important project which he's undertaken. And I'm also delighted that he has invited it to us within the journal itself. I wanted to, before I commended or invited the next speaker, I wanted to mention something about Professor Scott Fitzpatrick's important archaeological study. And the reason I say that, I want to take an angle which is of interest to us at the museum for very special reasons. And Dr. Fitzpatrick himself alluded to it. What is so important about this is that we have here a private company in Barbados, which is reaching out to academia, to scholars, to undertake important research, archaeological research. A private company which is making great efforts to preserve and make accessible that research. And I wanted to publicly thank the McNeil family, Ian McNeil and Julie McNeil and the family as a whole, for being so generous, and not just generous, but being so thoughtful and sensible in that regard. But I go one step further, and I would like to thank them for being such good citizens to Barbados as a whole and to the museum, where they have been significant donors and have been played an important part in the wall, the garden at the Barbados Museum, which we now use so efficiently and so frequently, and which has added so significantly to the footprint and the use of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society. And the The Walkers group under the McNeil family have pioneered slow food and health in Barbados. They have pioneered the archaeological work which we are hearing about at Walker's Reserve. They have pioneered health and nutrition in terms of the first farm-to-table restaurant in Barbados, integrating agriculture, and commercial use of food, and by extension, agriculture, tourism, and also sensible husbandry of the land. So this confluence of themes with respect to your work, Dr. Fitzpatrick, is very important for us here at the museum and nationally as well. So I'd say a very big thanks in that regard. So in concluding, let me say that this journal is not only wide and varied in its intellectual substance, it is also a very visually appealing product. And this is thanks in no small measure to the creative work of Cot Printry, but very much so as a result of the smart layout and design expertise of Mrs. Sally Miller, someone who continues to be so good to the museum in terms of the work that she does on our behalf. The evocative pictorial cover and back page are rested in content and color, as are the attractive advertisements in their natural elegance. In summary, this journal represents an eclectic collection of carefully chosen scholarship, presented in a form which is capable of universal acceptance and interest. In a word, it may be viewed as a journey in carefully guided, eclectic intellectualism. I commend it to Barbados, and I commend it elsewhere as adequate and suitable reading, well, for Sunday afternoon, or indeed for any time of day or night. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Trevor, for those inspiring and wonderful words. Now that we have declared the journal open, we're going to just give you another little quick sneak peek as to what is going to be seen on the cover and in the pages, and a little video. And while that video is running, should anyone have any questions that they'd like me to put to those on our panel this morning, you can just drop them in the chat and I will see that your questions are asked. Thank you. Thanks so much, everyone. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat just yet, but I just wanted to just make a note to everyone that not only is this journal valuable for its scholarly contributions, but I think it is valuable to Barbadians everywhere, wherever they may be, as a chronicle with regard to our way of life, our culture, our history, our heritage. It is where everything that is Barbadian is captured. So this is not just the volume of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society alone, but it is literally the journal of Barbadians everywhere. I believe Sir Henry Fraser has his hand up and would like to comment. Go ahead, Sir Henry.
Thank you very much, Kate. Every year for about 15 years, I would review the journal just before Christmas when it came out in time in my Sunday columns, so that it would help to promote the sale of the journal and to help to encourage Barbadians, whoever they are, wherever they are, to read this terribly important journal, this really long-lasting, magnificent journal. Well, this year it's a bit late, and therefore I would like to just say that it will be reviewed in my radio program, Did You Know, on Capital Radio 99.3 on the last day of January the 31st, Monday, January the 31st, Capital Radio. I will be reviewing the journal. But I'd like to ask a question of the editor, the chairman of the board, the president, and Alessandra, whether we wouldn't consider enlarging the size of the journal. It has always bothered me that magnificent photography, our great bird watching photographers, our historical photographs, all of these great photographs often appear as postage stamp size photos. And I think that's a terrible shame, because the pictorial element is so important. A lot of people are very visual. They may not even read the whole article, but they see these splendid photos. So I'd like to encourage the journal editorship and the museum to consider producing a larger journal in order to magnify the pictorial element. What do you think, Chairman, Editor, President, Director? Thank you. Did you hear that?
I was reluctant to respond. I looked very carefully at the chairman and to try to see if I could psych him out to see whether he was ready to respond. But let me just say this to you. I think I respect the suggestion. I must tell you that most journals that I know of, particularly historic journal, about the size. There are some that are larger, and it's true. If it's a question of size and getting more photographs, and I suppose that is something that can always be considered. But obviously there's an additional cost attached. Yes, it is true that the more copies you sell, the cost of publication may drop a bit.
That's right.
But the larger the thing is, the more the initial cost. And I mean, and I'd be very happy if with your considerable fundraising skills, you might be able to persuade any sponsors to assist us in this way. If that is done, I mean, I'd be a pretty guaranteed as the additional source of funding, then I would expect that we could really seriously consider enlarging the size. But it's not a bad idea. We can have a look at it.
I love a challenge, Pedro. I love a challenge.
Okay. The Barbados Museum would also like to thank at this time all of our sponsors who have helped to make the journal a reality, who have helped us to make this journal possible. We have had partnerships with some of them for a number of years, and we hope to continue to do so, as well as welcome any new partners who might be interested. So without further ado, I'd like to thank first and foremost Chancery Chambers, Altman Real Estate, Harris Paints, Oran Limited, Simpson Motors, the Exchange Interactive Center at the Central Bank of Barbados, Goddard's Enterprises, Consumers Guarantee Insurance, Foursquare Distillery, Carter's Hardware, Slow Food Barbados, and West Indies Rum Distillery, last but not least. Thank you so much to all of you. You have helped to make this journal possible. We look forward to continue working with you in future years. And of course, we welcome any other sponsorship which helps to keep this journal going. A special thank you also to Miller Publishing and to Cock Printry Limited, who continues to support us every year, making this journal possible. They will tell you that there's a lot of after hours work, a lot of extended deadlines, and a lot of camaraderie involved in getting this journal off the ground everywhere. So thank you so much to them both. If there are no further questions, I would like to thank all of our authors and contributors this year for giving us these absolutely wonderful articles. which capture these enterprising and wonderful elements of Caribbean and Barbadian heritage. And also thank you to our small editorial committee, and of course our publications and public programming committee at the museum, all of whom help and contribute to making this journal possible. Thank you so much and good morning.
Thank you.
Thank you too.